We are waiting for people to sign in. Sometimes Zoom slows down a bit as people are logging on. We'll begin at 1:01. Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Smith, editor of Rug Cooking Magazine, the host for this webinar, and we're pleased to have you joining us today. Before we begin, I invite you to visit our website, rugcookingmagazine.com, to see what we have to offer. We have our print magazine, chock full of wonderful rugs and articles by some of the best rug cookers in the world. We have a free newsletter, be sure to sign up for that. And we have a book club to share our most recent books, hot off the press. We'd love to welcome you to the Rug Cooking Magazine community. First, let's talk about a few housekeeping issues. If you get disconnected, you can reconnect using the same link. You will not be interrupting the talk. We are recording today's webinar, so if you have technical difficulties, don't worry. We'll send you a link and you can watch it later. And it will be posted on the RHM website very soon. We have the Q&A feature enabled on this event, so if you have a question for Rebecca, send it in, and if there's time, we'll answer a few of them at the end. So now to the fun part. Happy International Punch Needle Rug Hooking Day, everyone. Here to welcome you and to talk a bit about the day is the founder, and I must say the heart and soul of the day, Amy Oxford. Amy, welcome.
Thank you so much. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay. I can't see myself, so I wasn't sure. Well, here I am. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. Deb, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I can't tell you how exciting this is. Punch Needle Rug Cooking Day started in 2010, and it was started by a group of Oxford certified instructors to celebrate our very own special day. And it started out very small. It started with a dozen of us, and we all taught small workshops, demonstrated at the local library, and some people even had their own private parties. One lady had a slumber party, which I thought was fun. The second year we did it, we had a blizzard, so it was wiped out altogether, unfortunately. But it's grown every year, which is just so exciting. When we first started Punch Needle Rug Cooking Day, I had 54 Oxford certified instructors, and now I have 115. So our Oxford instructors group has grown, and look at what's happened to Punch Needle Rug Cooking over the years. It's just so exciting. Thanks to social media and thanks to people like you who are excited. So it's just wonderful to be here. We've planned a few things to celebrate Punch Needle Rug Cooking Day here. I'm at the Oxford Rug Cooking School here in Cornwall, and we are going to have a 20% off sale on everything on our website, and that starts tonight at midnight Eastern Standard Time. It's a flash sale, one day only. There's nothing about it on the website, so if you go on, when you check out, everything will be on sale. And I'm so excited because my new book will be on sale, Punch Needle Rug Cooking. And the thing I'm really thrilled about is for the day, for fun, we decided to have special punch needles made, and these have bamboo handles, which is awesome because it's an eco-friendly product. And we made these little bamboo pattern and butterfly pattern bags. So that's what we have going on here. I'm so delighted that Rebecca Martin is teaching this workshop. She's one of our most dedicated Oxford instructors and a gifted artist and a patient and kind instructor. You just couldn't be in better hands for this webinar. So thank you so much for including me in this special day. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. It's our pleasure to have you be a part of this webinar. Thanks so much. Now, what you've all been waiting for, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Rebecca Martin, our punch needle expert for the day. She lives and teaches in Northern Colorado. In fact, she's a certified Oxford punch needle rug cooking instructor and is in the process of obtaining her McGowan certification in traditional rug cooking. Drawn to the fiber arts since she was young, she has a background in needlepoint and quilting. She's also a whiz in the dye pots, creating lovely wool for her company, Storyteller Wool. She designs patterns, punch needle kits, and works on her own fiber art, which she generously shares with RHM. Rebecca is a frequent contributor to Rug Cooking Magazine. In fact, her work has been on the cover, and we're always pleased to have her creative designs in our pages. Hello, Rebecca. It's great to have you here.
Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you, Amy, for that kind introduction, and thank you, Deb. I'd like to thank Rug Cooking Magazine for setting up this call. It's really exciting for International Punch Needle Rug Cooking Day to have an international class. So technically it is Eve, but perhaps with some of our international friends, it might actually be the next day. I'm not sure. So through social media in the last couple of days, I've heard from some of you that are on the call, and I did see a few things coming through on the chat. So I know we've got Finland, Colombia, Chile, Turkey, we have the US, we have a lot of friends in Canada, we have Scotland and Denmark, and probably some other countries as well. So it would be a lot of fun for you to put in the chat where you are tuning in from. I might not necessarily be able to see it as the class is going on, but Rug Cooking Magazine can see it and they can give me a list at the end, because I think it would be really neat to know, where this is all going out to. So today we are going to be talking about the free pattern that is available on the Storyteller Wool website. It's a free download in honor of Punch Needle Day. It comes with directions and the pattern for you to trace. Some of you already have it. Some of you even ordered kits, so you've got supplies in front of you. This class is designed to just sit here and listen. It's designed for you to have punch needle supplies in front of you and to be working along. It's designed for everybody. So, well, let's get started. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. And the team from Rug Cooking Magazine is in the background, so you can message them questions or concerns if you can't hear something, see something, so just let them know. So here is our pattern, all finished. So this is our inspiration piece. It's the crocus. Now the crocus is the first flower, often the first flower to bloom here in Colorado, and we see it coming out of the snow. So when Amy asked me to design a pattern that was a flower and that had the theme of hope, a crocus coming out of the snow, I couldn't think of something that epitomized hope more than that. So here we have our crocus on its white snowy background. Now, if you had gone to the website and downloaded your pattern, it would come like this, where we've got lots of directions. And this class is also being recorded, so you'll be able to go back and listen to things. And I've also recorded other YouTube videos of just small segments that you can tune in and find. So on the last page of the pattern is the actual pattern. So when you have a paper pattern, the first thing you're going to need to do is somehow get this on your foundation cloth. So the best way to do this for most people is to find a bright sunny window and to tape it up with masking tape or a painter's tape. You tape your pattern to the window, and then you're going to tape your foundation cloth over it. Now with this, since it's obviously not a window, we're not going to be able to see the pattern through here, but I would tape it, and then I would take a pencil or a permanent marker. Now these pencils are fun. You can see it's quite a fat pencil. These are primary school pencils. They're meant for little children, so they have a softer lead and a much wider lead. And I really like those for tracing. And you can also get it down in the groove of the monk's cloth and drag it down and create some nice even lines. So you'd have this on your window and you trace your pattern. So the next thing you would need to do is have a frame, because we need our cloth to be stretched nice and tight. Now we have a couple different options for frames. The most accessible option for most people is a hoop. Now, a wooden embroidery hoop that you can get for a few dollars is not sufficient. Now, some people use those. I even make kits with them, but they are glued. So I glue the foundation cloth to them. But when you're working on your own, you're going to need a much more robust hoop, like a very thick quilting hoop. Or these hoops, this is a Morgan hoop. That's the brand name. Do you see this channel? It has a channel and, and this groove. And that allows the foundation cloth to lock in, and you can get a nice tight surface. So that's one of our options, is the hoop. Another option is a gripper strip frame. Now this is a tiny frame. Most people would not be using a frame this small. This is one I make for when I'm teaching classes. This has these nice steel spikes on it. You can see they curve outwards. And this holds our foundation cloth really very nice and tight. Now this is, if you really get into punching or rug hooking, you're going to want a gripper frame of some sort. There's Wonderful frames on amyoxford.com. In fact, I have a few of those frames, and they have these beautiful rabbit jointed corners. I mean, this is a very sort of what I'd call a quick and dirty frame that I built myself with some, and this is actually quite short. I would use a 1x4 inch board to build your own. But these are very simple to build, and I actually have directions to build them if anyone's interested in that. And you can order these strips. There's lots of different people who sell the strips. They're Howard brush strips. These are wonderful strips. So we have our gripper frame, or we have our hoop that we are then going to put our pattern on. So let's talk about our foundation cloths. We have a variety of cloths to choose from. One of the first ones is linen. Now linen is a little thicker and doesn't work with the window trick as well, but I love punching on linen. And linen is used a lot in traditional rug hooking. And this isn't the linen of our nice breezy summer shirts. This is a much more coarsely woven linen. It's not a apparel weight linen. And it comes in a bleached version, and this is the unbleached version. So you can get a whiter version of this. What I love about linen is it's a beautiful fabric. And with your work, you can even leave the linen exposed. So I really enjoy punching on linen. And sometimes with my beginner students, the holes are a little further apart and they find it easier to punch on. But linen is also one of our more expensive cloths. So that's not always what people will be using. Another cloth, which we wouldn't be using for this pattern, but I wanted to show you, is wool. Wool fabric is wonderful to punch in. I especially like punching in blanket weight wool, which is quite thick. But then this wool that we use in traditional rug hooking as well is fun to punch in. Next up is our rug warp. This is a cotton cloth. It's very heavy. I really like rug warp. I use this in traditional hooking as well. It's a white cloth, sort of an off-white cloth. So again, if you wanted to leave some of your background exposed, rug warp is a nice option. Now these cloths all come from Door Mill. I carry them at storytellerwool.com. but they're milled in the United States. And I know we have an international crowd here, but I think all of us like to buy from our local economies when possible. So I carry as much as I can products that are made in North America. So this cloth is milled in the United States. So the cloth that most of us are familiar with and that what we'll be using today is monk's cloth. Monk's cloth is a cotton cloth with a 2-strand over 2-strand weave, and it has these wonderful guidelines that come along. So we are going, I'm seeing some stuff come up saying that there's a problem with the sound. Is anyone having a problem with the sound, or are we okay? All right, I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to say we're okay. Okay, all right, it looks like we're doing all right. Just want to double check. So here's our monk's cloth. We've got these nice guidelines. Now, before we go any further with monk's cloth, we have to have a little chat about this cloth, this beautiful snowy white cloth. In the United States, we can find it in our big box retail shops. And the very confusing thing is it has the exact same name. It is called monk's cloth. So the beginner puncher goes into the stores in the craft department, sees the word monk's cloth, sees the price, and is absolutely thrilled. It's got holes, it's woven, they think it's the right cloth. This cloth, I believe, was designed for Swedish embroidery or something else. It is not designed for rug hooking. This is designed for rug hooking. This has holes. Technically, you could punch into it, and people have used it. And my caveat with this is the most important thing is to create. And so if this is the only cloth, or if burlap is the only cloth you can get a hold of, by all means, the most important thing out there is for you to be making your artwork. But you won't be as satisfied with the finished product. And this certainly would not hold up for a floor rug. But I always want people to be making something rather than making nothing. So our cloths are all specialty cloths that you would be purchasing online or at a rug hooking store. So unless, maybe punching a rug hooking will become so popular that all the big box stores will be carrying this cloth soon. So who knows? So here is our monk's cloth, and this is what we are going to be using today. So next up, we're going to talk about our needles, and then we will get going on our project. This is the fun part. Look at all these needles. All right. Now, Amy was just talking about the wonderful bamboo needle. Years ago, Amy had different woods, and she had these beautiful cherry needles, and that's what I have. So a lot of people see my needles and they think, oh, well, my maple needle mature to this color. It won't. These are cherry. So let's look at our needles. There can be some confusion with the fact that we've got regular needles and fine needles. Now, a fine needle does not necessarily mean a fine line. Our fine needle holds a finer yarn, a thinner yarn. So this is a worsted weight yarn. Your knitting yarns fit in our fine needles. So we'll start with our 8. Our 8s are 1/2 inch loop. So the regular one is holding our bulky weight rug yarn. Our fine one is holding our thinner yarn. Now, what's fun about these is Storyteller wool rug yarn is 4-ply, so it could be divided in half and put in your fine needle. Or you could take your finer yarns and double them up and put it in this needle. Now, I love to needlepoint, so I have a lot of needlepoint yarns left over. So I like to put those into my fine needles. So our 8-inch gives us this wonderful, really plush 1/2 inch loop. Then we have our 9, which is our 3/8 inch loop. The 10, now the 10 seems to be the go-to needle, and that's more of a product of social media than it being a superior needle height-wise. It just depends on what you're working on. The 10 gives us a 1/4 inch loop. I tend to use the 10 a lot because it's a nice size, but I love my 9 equally. And then we get, I really love these. So we have our 14 and our 13, affectionately known as the mini and the mini with heels. This guy's just a little bit taller, so it's like she's wearing heels. So I'm going to show you a few pieces that can be made. Now, what I love about these 2 smaller needles is we really do start getting a fine line with these. These are only available in the fine, and we get a nice thin line because we have such a short little loop. So here's a piece I made. I designed this. My son said he wanted to capture rainbows. This was years ago. So I thought, all right, well, we'll create this sort of toy sculpture variant to capture rainbows. Now, this was actually almost a sock weight yarn, very thin, super slippery. and exceedingly hard to work with, but it was too beautiful to not work with it. So I'd like to encourage you to try whatever fibers you have in the needles. Some are a little trickier to work with than others. And you just need to slow down and be patient. And often it's worth it. So I really enjoyed making this piece. Here's a good example of why I like using the fine yarns. You can get a level of detail that you just can't get with the thicker, the regular size needle. So if I had punched this with a regular needle, this was designed by my friend Lindsay, we would have lost the detail of the bunny's whiskers and eyes, and none of this detail would have shown up if I had used the regular needle. So I really love using my fine needles when I want a lot of detail. And again, it's the smaller fine needles. Now with our regular needles, my go-to will often be the 8 and the 10. And this is a good example of why. So my 10 is my 1/4 inch loop, that's my background. And then my 8 gives me this nice raised area. And so by skipping a needle, you can really see the difference. So I enjoy combining the 8 and 10 together. Now, if you combine the 8 and the 10 fine, you would get the same height difference. Let me show you an example when they are right next to each other in size. So this piece is done with the 10 and the 9 regular. It's very, very subtle. The white is done with the 10, so it's slightly recessed from the 9. So you just don't see the difference as much. So I recommend skipping a needle if you're really trying to get height difference. Now, the ultimate of height difference, you guys might recognize this if you get Rug Cooking Magazine, is this one. Now, this was punched with the 10. So right here, these are only a 1/4 inch high. And then I flipped the work. These are my back stitches. So these are the stitches on my working side of the frame. So to get this, I punched all of my work and I flipped it. So the loops show up on this side to create the nice flat stitches on this side. And this is addictive. Once you start creating this level of height difference, I see a need for it in almost all my projects now. I love combining these flat back stitches with the looped side. And one last word before we move on to our project about different yarns. So in the middle, we have our rug yarn. Now, the number one question I get about rug yarn is, well, beside it being bulky weight or thicker yarn, what makes it rug yarn? So here's what I say. Rub it on your arm, rub it under your chin. If you think to yourself, this would not make a good sweater, you found rug yarn. Rug yarn is coarse. And we like that because we're going to create these nice upright loops. Now, our luscious soft yarns would flop a lot. Like here, we've got a beautiful acrylic right here. I was able to punch with it. It looks very nice, but it snagged a lot. It's just so soft, but I still made it work. Here I have strips. You can, if you're a traditional rug hooker, you can put your strips into your needles. This is jersey knit, surprisingly fun. I really enjoy punching with jersey knit. The general rule of thumb is the softer the yarn, the harder it is to punch with. The exception is this, I almost call it like baby blanket yarn. It's like a fleecy yarn, and you can often find this at your larger craft stores, and it's quite economical. It would make a very good bathroom rug. So this is surprisingly fun to punch with. But right here, these are all acrylics, and we cannot apply a lot of steam to those. That would melt them. So you have to be aware of that when you're using a fiber that is not cotton or wool. So this is a blend right here, and that was another blend. And this was a very sort of almost a raw yarn out of Australia that I really enjoyed. Now, some of you might not be familiar with the term staple. That's how long the fibers are in the yarn. Now, a yarn with a shorter staple can look a little hairy or furry, and this one has that a little bit. You can't quite see it on the camera. So when you're creating your loops, those shorter staples might pop up on your more hairy yarns. All right, so we have talked about cloth, frame, needles. All right, we are going to get started on our pattern. So we're going to pretend that it's already been traced. So here we are, we've got our gripper strip frame. You'll often see cozies around the gripper strip frame, and that is because of how sharp these edges can be. And we need to stretch our cloth. So I've laid my pattern on. I'm going to give it a tug. I just think of, east, west, north, south, and I go around and I tug. Can you see how the pattern is distorting? And you can even see when I drew this pattern, I made a mistake, and I was doing that on a light box. So when you're tracing a pattern on a window, it is not going to be perfect, and that's fine. So I'm pinching. We want a drum-like surface. So look, even just with pinching, drum. Now, this was a fun thing I remember learning when studying with Amy. Before studying with Amy, I just pinched. I'm like, oh, this is drum, I'm good to go. And then in her week-long certification class, we learned the secret trick, and it has to do with some kissing ducks. So we get our hands down here, and they're like two kissing ducks. And that sounds silly, but we remember things when they're silly. So those kissing ducks are going to grab onto the cloth. We're going to lift it and we're going to pull. I don't know if you could see that, but I'm getting another good 1/4 of an inch. And I'm sorry for those of you who don't go by inches, but that's a good amount. So I'm going around with my kissing ducks and I'm getting my cloth even more firm. And this is why I really love a gripper strip frame. Because there's really no other way to get it this strong than with a gripper frame. So I've got it nice and strong. And one of the reasons why I like it nice and tight like this is it's going to alleviate hand strain. I'm going to get more even loops. And it has also opened up my grid and I can see what I'm doing better. All right, let's get started with the punch needle. Okay. So here we have our punch needle. I'm going to actually move this out of the way while I go over threading, just so you can see it more clearly. The punch needle has this wonderful channel. This is how we're always going to know the front of the needle. It has the channel. The back of the needle does not have a channel. So the front, we have a channel. A way to even double check yourself that you have the front of your needle is you flip it up and you see the word the Oxford. And you think, oh, I went to that webinar and I got to hear Amy Oxford and got to meet Amy Oxford. And look, I've got my Oxford needle. So that's how I always remember this is the front. We're going to take our yarn and you're going to put it through the eye of the needle like that. And then I'm going to notch it, notched in. Now I'm going to pull on this side. And as I pull, the yarn runs freely through here. Now I have this big long tail. That won't do. We need short tails. This is rug yarn. Rug yarn's precious. And all of these are going to be cut off anyways. So if you had a kit and you were starting like this every time, you would go through the yarn in your kit with all these little bits that you wouldn't be able to rethread. So we must always, always, always start with our little tails. So I'm going to demonstrate this one more time, but I want you to know I have a video dedicated just to threading the needle and actually to each of these steps so that you can go on YouTube on Storyteller Wool and find videos for just the skill that you're interested in. And don't be embarrassed that you forgot how to thread a needle. I've taught a 4-hour class and then had people call me later. That's one of the reasons I started making the videos. It's just, this is a new skill. So channel, we're going through the eye of the needle. We notch it in. We give a nice little tug and then we snuggle it back up because we don't want to waste our yarn. So that is threading the needle. Now holding the needle, I'm going to have my thumb and index finger. I'm going to hold it like I'd hold a pencil. And my middle finger rests nicely on the back. It's a very ergonomic needle. I've used other needles and I have to say that this is a very finely designed needle. So I'm holding it with a pencil grip, which is very natural. We're all used to that grip. And when I punch, I have it a little higher up than my pencil. If I kept it on a diagonal, the chance of me hitting other loops are higher. So I'm going to hold it a little more upright when I work. So let's go back to our pattern. If any of you have your pattern stretched in front of you. This is where we get to talk a little bit about psychology in crafting. Now, if I just let you all loose and said, all right, let's get started. All the right-handed people out there would want to start right here in the right-hand corner. It's a very natural place to want to start. Now, we talked about that our first time we punch, we're just going to have this tail. We're not even going to have a loop. So if I start right here, it's just going to be this tail, and that'll make my corners weaker. So when we start, we're going to start right here and go around. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to punch, I'm going to show you first on this little guy before I actually punch on the pattern. Just so you can see it, I can get a little closer to the camera. So I'm going to punch all the way down, and the punch stops me. And any of you traditional rug hookers out there, the beauty of this is the punch is going to determine the size of the loop, not my own hand pulling up. So I'm punching all the way down, and then I'm going to come up and I'm gliding. I'm just skimming the fabric. So picture yourself shuffling across the floor in your slippers, or just gliding and going back in, just sliding across and going back in. If I pull up too high, that last loop comes up. So I'm just ice skating across that cloth. I go in, I come out, and right now I'm going every other hole basically. And now this is a little tricky. Let's try it. Oh, I got the right angle. So this is what's happening on the back. These wonderful loops are forming. Now, obviously they are no longer forming in a straight line because I'm punching upside down. But here we go. So that's what's happening. This is your backside. This is, or these flat stitches I was talking about in that other piece. When we're working, we often will use a stitch gauge. Now, stitch gauge is just a 1-inch square cutout. You could make one of these. You just need 1 inch. And I lay it over, and I want to see 4 stitches per inch whenever I'm filling something in. I want to see 6 stitches per inch when I'm doing a border or a detail. So I've got my 6 stitches per inch or my 4 stitches per inch. And this, this stitch gauge has a handy graphic here of the next thing we're going to do is how to change colors, how to stop. So I'm punching along, and I'm just going to take my finger and I'm going to stop the yarn right as it comes out. So then I can pull it free. I'm going to take my scissors, snip it very close, because again, remember, we're pushing these tails through. Push the tail through, push the tail through. So our scissors are our second tool. I have small pairs of scissors everywhere in my house. These are actually surgical scissors that I order by literally by the dozen. So small scissors, your second tool to your needle will be your small scissors. So I've pushed those tails in. I've completed my running loop stitch by pushing these tails through, and now they're on the other side. Now, this is always sort of the party trick of punching or rug hooking. What if I change my mind? What if I say, you know, oh, purple was the wrong color? Watch this. Okay, and that really freaks people out. I just pulled it all out. So if I can pull it all out, what on earth is keeping this in? And that's a very valid question. So what is keeping our loops in? So I'm punching along, I'm punching all the way down. I'm going every other hole for my detail and border stitches. And by the way, you don't count. In the beginning, everybody counts, but then you stop counting. Your muscle memory takes over. So I'm punching along, and then, you know, it's time to switch colors. So I stop, I pull it loose, I snip. Some people will snip absolutely flush, but sometimes I have trouble seeing it. So I have a little bit sticking out, then I push it through. Now you saw how I just zippered that yarn out. With my tails pushed through, I've completed the running loop stitch. Now, if I pull on it, it's not going anywhere. Now, if I really, really yanked on it, I could pull it out, but really that's a significant difference. I mean, if you can see me pulling, now if that tail was up on this side and I give it just the slightest tug, it all comes out. So that's how it's staying in. Next up is our spacing. In some ways, this graphic is a little clearer than my punching. We don't want big strips. In traditional rug hooking, we leave a little more space with our work. In punching, we don't. We don't want to see big strips of our foundation cloth. And when we punch, we would like to keep our stitches close together and staggered if possible. So here we can see a strip, and it's actually not that noticeable. In fact, if I added another line right here, it might compress it in. But we don't want to be nudging loops out of the way and getting another row in there. Basically, the needle's going to tell you the needle is the width of your fiber. So you just lay it down and you're going to go in. And often that involves skipping a row. So we aren't leaving big strips. We're not nudging the yarn out of the way. And if you put too much yarn in your piece, so this is a grid, all the materials we work on are a grid. And if you overwhelm it with yarn, the piece will literally dome up. So that's way too much yarn, and your piece will never lay flat. So it's this happy medium between the two. And with the spacing, the best example I can show with that is going back to this piece. If you picture this as actually a pillow on your couch, if I had spaced this out too much, think about how a pillow will flex on your couch and move. You would see that foundation cloth peeking through as it moved. So that's one of the reasons we want it nice and tight. If it's a rug on the floor, we want that integrity. If it's a pillow, we don't want to be seeing the cloth. If it's a wall hanging, then you have a lot more flexibility. So let's go back to our piece. So we have our purple threaded, our dark purple. We're not going to start here, even though we want to. And I will usually never punch along a drawn line because, again, I can't see it very well. I probably will put my yellow along this line for this pattern, but I'm going to put my purple right in here. So I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to punch down. One of the beauties of these nice gripper frames is, see, I'm punching. I'm not hitting the table, not hitting my leg. There's plenty of room for the punch to go. This is my border. So I'm going to be going every other hole, punching down. And I mean, I can really motor when I'm punching on a really tight surface. So I'm punching along every other hole. Now, if you're punching along and you hear it, you're actually hitting some of the strands of the monk's cloth and breaking it. It can handle an occasional break here and there, but if you're hearing it all the time, you might want to, just relax a little bit. So when we get to a turn, so I'm coming up to a turn, I'm going every other hole. Let's see if it actually happens naturally for me. If I have the choice of just going over one hole or making a slightly bigger stitch, I'm always going to pick the slightly bigger stitch because I don't want to go any smaller than this every other hole. But this one, I'm actually going to turn the corner. Now, I'm turning my needle. So the channel is facing the way I'm going. If you want to think about yourself riding a bike, this is going to, it's like my handlebars. If I'm going this way, it's going to face this way. If I'm going this way, if I allow the needle to get turned, I can still punch with it, but it's going to torque the yarn and do kind of a little something funny on the other side. So now I've turned and I carry on and I'm going around. So in the beginning, our border is going to be the 6 stitches per inch. So I would lay this down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 in there. That's great. And I'm going to then skip a row and I'm going to punch another border row. And I like to go all the way around and actually end in the hole I started. Because remember, this is just going to be a tail, one tail. So if I end in that hole, it's got 2 tails. So I'm going to go all the way around. I'm going to skip a row in between, give it a little breathing room, but not so much that I'm seeing the cloth. And then I'm going, so since I'm in the mindset of 6 stitches per inch, especially when you're starting out, I recommend you do all the 6 stitches per inch at once. So I'm going to go do my border, do another row of the purple, and then I'm going to start outlining each of these elements because we want a nice tight, think of it as a fence along each area where it's going to meet another color. If I punch this really loose, this purple petal and this white background will kind of meld with each other and look sort of polka dotted and it won't look as crisp. So think about fences. And in a perfect world, we are going to have a fence on both sides that any color meets. Sometimes, I admit, and I know Amy's listening, sometimes I get a little lazy and I will just have one fence. So you need a minimum of 1 fence and 2 fences are perfect. So you'd have this be tight and then that first row of the white would be tight. But at the very least, one of them has to be tight. So I'm outlining everything. These are a detail. These are a single line. So these will be 6 stitches per inch. This is going to be 6 stitches per inch. And the reason I recommend, you've already had it threaded. So you say you're doing this and you think, well, why can't I just carry on and fill it in? You can, you certainly can. And that's what I do when I punch. However, when you're starting out, you've spent so much time punching your 6 stitches per inch, you might carry on and keep that up in here. And we really need to switch over and loosen up when we fill things in. So by outlining everything first in your tighter stitch, you can then sort of take a break and come back and know it's time to fill everything in. And you're less likely, two things with that. With a kit, if you did the entire thing in that really tight stitch, you'll run out of yarn because the kit designer was not expecting you to punch that tightly. So you want to switch over, especially if you're using a kit, and then also the doming of the project, like I mentioned. So let me grab the piece. So, if I punch this too tight, it would actually, it literally would dome up. Like instead of this being flat, this would be a dome. So, and you can see why I need this tight. We want to be able to see this and this single line, and especially our nice yellow line. We want that to stand out. So now let's have a little bit of cooking show magic. All right, and here we are. We have punched all the way around. So I've done all of my detail. Here's my border, here's my detail. It's all punched with my 6 per inch. I'm happy with it. And if you aren't happy with it, you pull it out and you stitch again. That's what's really great with monk's cloth. Watch, I'm gonna pull this out. I've got these big holes, no problem. I'm gonna drag, actually the needle's better to do this. I'm gonna drag my needle over it, store the grid, and carry on. I change my mind all the time when it comes to color. I'm always redoing things, in the monk's cloth or the rug warp or the linen can handle it. So I have my whole piece outlined with all the colors. Now I'm going to take that mental break and say it is time to start filling in. So 4 stitches per inch. If you're going along a straight line, that's actually skipping every 2 holes. But very quickly the monk's cloth compresses and you can't see holes. So don't get caught up in counting holes. It's more, you're going to learn the muscle memory of it. You're going to use your stitch gauge and you will see that you have loosened it up. So I'm going to fill in here. I'm going to fill in each of these elements, and then I'm going to work on my background. Now at this point, you've probably flipped over your work to take a look at all your lovely loops. So you flip it over and you say, oh no, what have I done wrong? And you really question punch needle rug hooking, especially if you're a traditional hooker and you're used to everything being perfect as you pull it towards yourself. You see all these tails. I mean, what's going on with this yellow? It's trying to run away. They don't really look like petals. I mean, what's this? It's a mess. And you question yourself. Now, don't get discouraged. This is the messy phase. In some punch needle designs, it will not come together until the very end, until all the neighboring loops are in. So like this is a very good example right here. Now everything's mirrored. So see how wonky that looks? It's not a straight line. That is this line right here. It looks wonderful on this side. It doesn't on this side. That is just because the neighboring loops are not in there to help prop up all of our loops. So once that background's filled in, you're going to be so much happier. So don't despair when you get to this point. It is totally natural to look at this and question yourself, but you just need to carry on. So we've looked at it, we've flipped our work back over, and we've said, all right, we know about the messy phase. We're going to be okay. So now we are going to finish up our piece. So here we are. I've left a few things so we can finish it up together. Now, again, with the psychology, I'm going to thread my needle again so you can see. I'll do it right here so you can see it. I'm going in the needle, the eye, notching it, pulling it, snuggling it up. So here I have this little area here left to fill in because, I had outlined it. Just like my brain wanted me to start over here, my brain's going to look at this and say, little space, I must put a lot of little stitches in there. It's just human nature, but this is a fill area that we are not going to put a lot of stitches in there. In fact, we're only going to get about 4 stitches in there. So we're going to go in and get our stitches in, and that's it. So that area is filled in. Push my tails in. Some people like to push their tails in as they go, and some people like to wait till the end. My daughter always waits till the end and then tries to tuck me into pushing all her tails in. All right, I'm going to fill in this area. And here I go. Again, and I look to each stitch and I punch I try to sort of hit the center of the stitch. And I come up here. Now, I like to switch to my non-dominant hand. Punch needle is quite easy, fine motor, and it's not as easy as with your dominant hand, but I punch with both hands. And for quite a few years, I actually would tell my students, oh, if you can brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, you can punch with your non-dominant hand. And then I thought, I really should try brushing my teeth with my non-dominant hand. And I can now tell you it is easier to punch with your non-dominant hand than it is to brush your teeth. So just practice with it, especially if you have some weakness in your hands or some arthritis. Learning to punch with both hands is really great. We're going to finish this little area up here. So this is, I really want you to see this. This is interesting. We can clearly see there's space. See, we know we need to put our white in here. But if I'm flipping my work and looking at it all the time, I flip over here and I see no space. It looks filled and I get concerned. But this is our working side. So if you see space, we're filling it. So thread my needle. Needle's threaded, short tail. Now I had said don't be shoving yarn aside, but every once in a while you might need to shove a little yarn aside. And again, this is my fill stitch. So I'm doing 4 stitches per inch. Now I come over here and I've hit a dead end, but I still need to fill in here. It's very tempting to say, well, why can't I just jump over and carry on? No, a needlepoint, everything is hidden on the back. You wouldn't be able to see it, but boy, a needlepointer would never jump over and carry on. And we don't in punch needle rug hooking either. If I were, say this was a rug on the floor and I were to jump over, I now have 2 pieces of yarn over each other. And if it sits on the floor and wears, that will wear through the yarn and that will hurt your rug. So everything that I'm teaching you right now can make a small 8-inch piece or can make a room size rug. So it's best to always know good practices. And even if something is hidden, you might as well learn how to do it the right way. So I'm stopping because I hit a dead end, putting this in, punching it down. And people then think, oh, there's all these tails. I don't like the idea of all these tails. They blend in, you can't see them. I'll show you a piece in a little bit. It's just filled with tails. So I come in, I'm gonna circle around here, making sure, even I struggle and we'll try to, my brain wants me to do little stitches. Switch hands. Okay, so my piece is now finished. So these right here, sometimes I will pull out a single line and punch it again. The second time you punch something will always allow it to be seen the best. But in this case, they're looking pretty good. Now I cleaned up some of this to save us time, but if I hadn't, this would be a mess. It would be filled with tails like we see up here. So our scissors, our second tool, we're going to come along and quite aggressively because rug yard can handle it. We go like this and it pops up all of our tails. I'm going to give it a little tug and snip it flush. And I'm getting rid of all my little bits. It's a little rug haircut right now. And I've been saving all my bits this year, and I am going to use them to stuff a draft guard that I'm going to make at the end of the year. So I'm snipping off all my tails. And now I'm going to go into my cleanup phase. So, well, snipping the tails is part of it. I'm going to look around and I'm going to see, oh, here's another tail. Now, sometimes, like originally that yellow, remember how strange that yellow was? Where did that picture go? Here we go. So originally it was all out of whack, but when I started putting the white in, see how it righted itself all on its own. But if it hadn't, I would have just pulled it in. And I go around my lines and you can see this was the last thing I punched in. It's a little taller. Kind of mush things in, check on things. Right here, it's not as crisp as I'd like it. So I'm going to pull back these purples and organize the whites. I find this very satisfying because, crisp it up, crisp up all our lines. I'll often go around the whole design and pull back on one color from another. And there's still some lumpiness and unevenness, and that's gonna sort itself out when we steam. It's a little hard to see because it's white, but this is one of the things I love about punching rug cooking. So as I was punching this, I think I was getting a little tired, a little hungry. I was rushing, and I hit a neighboring loop and it popped it out. This is not a tail. This is actually a loop that's too high now. I don't have to undo anything. I'm gonna grab it. I'm gonna pretend it's a tail. It's gonna blend right in. I mean, you gotta love that. So very forgiving. So, you know, you can fuss with it for ages. You know, you can pull up things that are a little low. And you just get it sorted out. So now, put the iron on. We are going to take this off our frame. So I'm going to have it back on its working side. And again, let's talk about the difference of how a lot of people look at this and say, hey, I like this side better. That's okay to like this side better. This is a flat stitch versus our loop stitch. This is the back. That's fine. To me, that's a lot of lovely loops that you're hiding. But I do appreciate that some people really like this side. I just want to always encourage you, if you really like this side, is it because you haven't really learned to clean up this side? And maybe with a little nudging and other things, you might like this side better. Or like in that other piece, we could combine and, you know, I could have punched this with the flat stitches. So here I have it on my piece, on my board, and I'm gonna take it off. Now, we're not gonna rip it like a bandage. We're gonna pop it. And it's good to get in the habit of always popping, because if your piece was bigger and you were moving it around, you might have loops right here. You wanna just pop. So we're gonna pop it off. So this is where we're gonna talk about something. We'll see how our international audience. So in America, we like to eat a lot of tacos, especially out in the West where I am. We eat a lot of Mexican food. Now, I had a student tell me one day when I pulled it off, I said, you want it to curl? And she goes, oh, it looks like a taco. I was like, you're right. Look, it looks like a taco. This is good. This means you put enough yarn in it. We want a taco. So when you pull it off and you see it curling up, be proud of yourself. You got a taco. If you pulled it off and it was rolled up like a taquito, which is a Mexican dish that is a rolled piece, then you have way too much yarn. If you take it off your frame and it lies limp and flat with no curl at all, like a tortilla, then perhaps you could have put more yarn in. So go for the taco. Next, we will need some form of an ironing surface. So this is just one of those quilt ironing boards. And see, I got my rolled up piece, I got my taco. I'm gonna lay it loop side up. I am gonna move this over a little so we don't have too much steam coming onto the camera. And at this point, you might look at it again and say, oh, you know, I really, you know, want to mush this guy here. You know, I'm always fussing with my work, and I'll even fuss with it when it's finished. And as you move the piece, a tail might pop out that you need to tend to. Now, this is where we're not going to be shy with our water. Can you see? I've got a cloth in here that, I mean, this is a lot of water. When we say we want a wet cloth, we want a wet cloth, not damp. Okay. I'm laying my quite wet cloth over my work. I'm gonna move it over so I don't steam the camera up too much. Now I've just turned the iron back on, so I'm not quite sure how hot it is, but let's try it. So I'm going to place a significant amount of pressure on this for about 10 seconds. Oh yeah, you hear that? So this is how I'm steaming my piece. I'm relaxing the piece. I'm fluffing all that wonderful 4-ply yarn. So I'm giving it quite some pressure here. And I'll re-wet my cloth as I go if it's a larger piece. The finishing is something that you don't want to skip. All right, Now in person, I really can see a difference when I pull this off. When I pull it back, the cloth, it just looks all fluffed up and more even and pretty. I'm not sure that's totally reflected on the camera, but this is just causing the yarn to relax. And see how it's flat now. There's no taco, it's flat. So next, all right, we've got our little piece. What are we gonna do with it? So sometimes I'll even give it a little steam on this side, but it's not really necessary. I'm gonna cut it. Having a good pair of shears is another wonderful tool. You know, your kitchen scissors just can't handle cloth like a good pair of shears will. And then you tell all your family members, do not touch my cloth scissors. So I leave about a 2-inch border. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, you know, rug hooking and punch needle rug hooking comes out of more the New England and maritime areas in Canada, and those areas are really known for their thrift. So in honor of our thrifty ancestors, you know, monk's cloth has this wonderful thread in it, and it's really great to sew with. So don't just discard these pieces. It can become a great thread for you to use for the next step. So I'm just going to trim my corners. If I'm being really precise, I might have a ruler out while I'm doing this, but I want to honor everyone's time. So I'm then going to fold my corners in, and the piece is sort of still a little damp, which helps. Kind of helps hold it down. And you know, I'll just take this cloth. You never want to put your iron onto the piece directly. I'm one of those people that kind of always has to test everything. And yes, yeah, you can burn yarn. It'll happen. So now I'm going to fold this up. It actually works better. I'm going to get my damp cloth back out. I don't need it quite as damp. But the beauty of the damp cloth is it gives you some weight. So I can fold this, have the cloth weight it down to get it all folded. And kind of fold it under, get it all folded. And then since it's still damp, this is just gonna scheme those edges for me and help fold them and train them. Cut a little undone under there. So now, what I would do is I would do this again. I would fold this under and I'd steam it. Then I would take some of my thread that you'll have it everywhere. Oh, and a note on monk's cloth. You'll note that this is serge. If you bought a yard of monk's cloth, you don't need to have a serger. You could zigzag this with a sewing machine, or you could just put some masking tape around it. But this stuff will shred if it's not contained. So I'm going to fold this, and then I will take my threads and sew it. And there's a great tutorial on this in Amy's book, and in the new book that Simone wrote for Rug Hooking Magazine. She has a wonderful tutorial on finishing. You can see this online as well. So we're going to then sew all of this, and we will see. Now, I have attached a few magnets to mine, so we can ignore the magnets. But see, I've sewn all along here and pressed it. And now I am ready for my piece's final reveal. So what are we going to do with this small piece, for this 8-inch piece? So if we could have the other camera come on, I want to show what I have done with my piece. So back in 2017, I started Storyteller Wool. It actually was not my idea. It was my rug hooking teacher and friend Sherry Whiten's idea to start the company. And we started Storyteller Wool together and did that for 2 years. She's a nurse, and nursing called her full time as the company grew. It wasn't as good a fit for her. So she is off. We always say she keeps people from dying, where I'm the one dyeing yarn. So we're both doing some dyeing. And she's still a huge part of my life. And Sherry, especially in my family, is known for her treasures. I actually have a hashtag on Instagram devoted to Sherry's treasures because she's always giving me stuff. So Sherry gave me this beautiful antique basket. And what I did is I attached some magnets to the underside and attached the crocus to it. So this basket sits next to my desk. It opens up. I can put all the things that I hope to get to, and I can have my mentor and friend right next to me, even though she's no longer part of Storyteller Wool. I have Sherry by my side. So I hope that the crocus has inspired you to get more interested in punch needle rug hooking. You can find me on storytellerwool.com. On Instagram, it's Storyteller Wool. Little hiccup with Facebook, you have to add the S. So it's Storyteller Wools on Facebook. So you can find me there. I also have a YouTube channel with lots of videos. I have some videos that are going up today that are different segments of what we went over today. So if you just wanted to look up threading the needle, I also reviewed a bunch of books. There's so many wonderful books out there, especially through Rug Hooking Magazine. I have some book reviews to inspire you on there as well. So here's to International Punch Needle Day and the Hope Crocus. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rebecca. I love that little crocus pattern and your instructions were great. We do have some questions from the audience for Rebecca. We'll get to those in just a minute. In the meantime, let me tell you about a few special offers. We have 2 new books that you might be interested in. Tattered and Timeless by the ladies at the Old Tattered Flag. Julie Thomas and her mom has projects and instructions for both rug hooking and mini punch needle. The newest book from Rug Hooking Magazine, Mastering the Art of Punch Needle Rug Hooking, is from Canadian punch needle artist and teacher Simone Voivodin. It's a comprehensive how-to book on rug punching. We have a special offer on these 2 books for our participants today. So go to the Rug Hooking Magazine website to order and use the promo codes you see on the screen. And we have a special offer for a subscription to Rug Hooking Magazine. 1 year for $19.95 for 5 issues of incredible inspiration. Subscribe on our website, www.rughookingmagazine.com/punchday. I hope you join our Rug Hooking Magazine. Now for those questions for Rebecca. Rebecca, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here's question number 1. How do we choose the right yarn for the needle and for the material we're punching into? Can we buy inexpensive yarns to practice with?
Yes, 100%. So again, it's what will fit in your needle you can punch with. I have punched with sari ribbon. Let's go back to that little guy that I had. All kinds of fibers can be punched with. So if you have a thinner needle, you're going to want to find thinner yarns and go ahead and punch with them. If you notice, if you ever have the yarn falling out of the needle, double it up. And the fine needles have this wonderful little eye hook on them to help train the yarn to those thinner, lighter yarns away from the needle as you're working. So if they fall out, try doubling. I've even tripled yarn up to get it to fit in a needle. So it is the rare yarn that won't work. It's the ones that are very fringy will gum up in the needle. But give every yarn a try. The coarser the better, but again, like that minky yarn works really nicely. People cut up t-shirts and pull them and get them really thin and have gotten them in the needles. There's a woman on Instagram, Rose Perlman. She's just a wonderful artist. She has punched with cut up trash bags. So you can try anything.
Can you use a traditional rug hooking gripper lap frame for punch hooking?
Yes, and I do that. The one thing is we like to flip our work and check on it. And that's a little harder with our traditional frames, but I will grab usually whatever frame is closest for my work. And so I'm often working on a traditional frame. So go for it. Now, one of my traditional frames has very flat gripper strips on it. That's my travel frame. And it just won't hold as well, but I'll still use that because it's such a nice compact frame. So definitely use the frame you have before buying another one.
Are the directions for building a frame on your website?
They aren't, but they can be. I will put them up there. Yes, I have a printout, and to date, people would email me and I would just email them the printout. But I think that's a good idea that they just sit up there so people can download them, because they're quite simple to build. And I built myself quite a large one. There's a YouTube video about it. It's 2 feet by 3 feet, and I attached folding table legs off of that I got on Amazon for like a card table, so I can fold it up and shove it under the bed or in the closet when I'm not using it.
Is the 4 stitches or 6 stitches per inch the same if you're using thick yarn or fine yarn? It seems like it would be different just because of the diameter of the yarn.
Very, very good question. So what that is based on rug yarn. And if you're using your thinner needle, that gauge I just mentioned doesn't apply. When we use our thin needle, we're going in pretty much every hole. So when I created this, whenever I was using that fine needle, I'm going in almost every hole. I'm leaving a little more space in between my rows, but I'm going in every hole. So it is a completely different gauge. So as you play around with all your different fibers, you might want to just punch a few square inches and see how it feels. You might want to loosen it up. You might want to tighten it up. The main thing is you don't want to be seeing your foundation cloth on either side poking through.
What size needle do you use as you're filling in, for instance, the background or the interior parts of your motifs?
Exact same needle. So it's the stitch, the amount of times we're going into the foundation fabric, not the needle, that changes. Now in this piece, even though the background looks totally different, I use the same needle. I just flipped my piece over so I was seeing the background stitches. But if you wanted your background to be a different height, that's when you're going to switch your needles. I might be punching with my 10 and then want to switch over to my 8, which is a taller loop for a bigger background. I heard that.
So the needle numbers really determine the height, not
Yes.
the density.
Right, exactly. So an 8 half-inch loop, 9 3/8 inch loop. So all it has to do with is your height. Yes.
Do you use different weight yarns in the same piece? Any advice?
Yes, I have. And that's a lot of fun. I have punched with, in fact, my certification piece for Amy used every single needle in the same piece. And what I did that I thought it was kind of clever. I started with the largest needle. I even had the craftsman involved. And as the piece went up, the needles got smaller and smaller. So I had cattails and a lake, and then it went up to a tree line, then it went to mountains. And then when it got to the sky, I was using the tiniest needle. I was using the 14. So I thought that was a really neat look. Now, as a floor rug, you'd have different levels, and that might not be appropriate. But for wall hangings, it's a lot of fun to mix and match.
Any tips for using Nubbly yarns?
They want to get gummed up in here. So that's where, because I spin and I'm not a very good spinner. So all of that is very nubbly. So with my spun yarn, I'm going to use my hook instead of my punch. It's exact same stitch. It's just I'm pulling towards myself with a hook instead of pushing away with a punch. So if I would wanted to use roving, I'm more likely to use a hook again instead of a punch. So there are certain fibers that if you really would like to use them, it might be better to try using a hook.
Do you have a YouTube video that addresses punching with wool strips?
I don't think I do, but I could. And in fact, I have a wool strip right here. Let me thread one and just give you a quick demonstration. So my go-to size for a strip, I really like punching with a 6. So again, it has nothing to do with the length of, I'm not gonna take my 8 cut and put it in an 8 needle. It has to do with how wide this shaft is the same on each of the regular needles. So I really like a 6 or a 7 cut are my favorite to put in the regular needles. So I've got it loaded with my, I believe this is probably a 6 cut in traditional rug hooking. And I'm just gonna punch down all the way, skim across the fabric, and I'm just punching the exact same way I'm punching with yarn. The only difference I find when punching with wool strips is for some reason, and see there, you can see my loops. So the difference is the last couple inches of a strip like to gum up a little. So I find I end up just sort of snipping that off. That's the only difference I've ever seen. It's great to punch with little strips, and especially if you're doing a background, or the only thing I found you can't do is sort of a, what's that term, where you're kind of hooking in all different directions. I'm forgetting the name of it.
Anagoglin or higgledy piggledy.
Yeah, the punch doesn't seem to want to do that as much. But yeah, I think it looks great. So definitely. And then, I would advise cutting really long strips so you're not rethreading it all the time.
Mhm. Here's a very specific question. I'm using a worsted weight B&L Heritage on monk's cloth with a fine number 13, and my loops will not stay in place. What could I be doing wrong? Is the yarn too thin?
I would try doubling up and slowing down. So again, if the yarn is soft, it just wants to slip all around, and that my leaves, oh, I mean, they really gave me fits. I actually found that with you said you're using a 13. When I was punching, it was so slippery. Every once in a while, I'd even have to just give it a little tug here to create some tension on it. But it was so worth it. I mean, this yarn, and this is a Sherry's treasure. She had given me this yarn. So I wanted to make it work. So, and also with our smaller needles, there is less fine motor. As I'm punching down and coming up, that's a much smaller, if I pop too much, it's just going to always pop right out. So because I have such a small little shaft here, I have to come up very slowly so that I don't pop out too far and pull the yarn out.
I have a couple of questions about punching with embroidery thread or DMC floss, which is the mini embroidery punch. Do you do that also?
So I have played around with that. My daughter especially likes that. I have, it's what is it? It's the blue ultra punch. I have that punch.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
the same concept as doing punch needle. But I devoted my time more to the rug side of things. So, but it's the same skill set. It's just a little more complicated to thread that needle.
Okay, we're running out of time here. So here's one last question for you. When you are done punching for the day, do you leave the piece on the frame or should you remove it?
That's a good question, and probably coming from a traditional rug hooker. I leave it on the frame, especially if I'm working on a large rug. It's not coming off. I mean, I've spent so much time stretching that monk's cloth tight, it's not coming off. And that, again, that's where that steaming comes at the end. You're not gonna distort your piece. I think, and I could be wrong. I know there's a lot of traditional rug hookers that have been around a lot longer than I have, but I think the idea of always removing your work from the frame came from when we were using burlap more with traditional rug hooking. And the concern was that it would stretch out of shape. But the materials that we use today with the monk's cloth, the rug warp, and the linen, I've had zero problem leaving it on the frame. And I'll admit, I've left stuff on the frame for a very long time, and I've never had a problem.
Okay, I think that will wrap it up with the questions then. Thank you so much for doing this today, Rebecca. We really, really, really appreciate your time and your energy and your wonderful creative designs. Thanks again.
Thank you.
For all of you watching, remember the challenge. We invite you to enter your punch piece for a chance to win your choice of Rebecca's wool in a wool pack from Storyteller Wool. Post your punched crocus photo by April 12th, either completed or in progress. A winner will be selected at random on April 13th. Share photos on Facebook. You will see the links in the chat. This is our 5th webinar, so a few notes before we end today. Thanks to the pandemic, we all learned new skills, and we at Rug Hooking Magazine started this webinar series so that we could still visit with you and send you wonderful rug hooking information. Even if we can't get together right now, you can click into our webinars anytime for some fun and fascinating rug hooking personalities. This won't be the last virtual event, so keep your eyes open for more to come. You will get a follow-up email with a link to this event so that you can view it again as you continue punching. Rebecca gave us a lot of information today, and it will be nice to revisit her demonstration as you work. So once again, thank you all for coming, and happy punching. Goodbye, everyone.